What I intend to do in the initial part is really to indicate to you what the committee does and who the members of the committee are in respect of the Political Films Consultative Committee. Let me go back to tracing a little bit of the history. I think you may remember that on the 23rd of March this year, Parliament passed the Act called the Films Amendment Bill to allow party political films that are factual, objective, and that do not dramatize or present a distorted picture. I'm sure you have followed through the second reading speech of the acting minister at that time when he presented the bill in Parliament. The bill will come into effect when it is gazetted later today. So this is a significant time. We thought we owe you the responsibility to tell you about ourselves. First, I will address the role of the PFCC. PFCC is an acronym for Political Films Consultative Committee. As part of the move to allow party political films, the government has set up an independent advisory committee. It is called the Political Films Consultative Committee, or the PFCC. It is really to advise the Board of Film Censors, or the BFC. The advice is in respect of whether a film which falls under the definition of a political film is allowed under the amended Films Act. The PFCC will provide an independent and objective assessment to the BFC based on the statutory criteria that have been set out under the Films Act. I'm honored to be appointed the chairman of the PFCC. Since I've been informed of my appointment earlier this year, I have been quite actively sourcing for suitable candidates to join the PFCC. The Advisory Council on the Impact of New Media on Society, or AIMS, I think you have followed the development of the work of AIMS as well as the recommendations of AIM. One of the recommendations they had made is that members of the committee should be citizens of high standing who are non-partisan and whose views would carry weight with the public. So that has given me the guidance. I've also looked for members who together with me represent a cross-section of society. And the 6 members that are in the committee, aside from me, come from relevant fields, namely from the academia, from the legal fraternity, from the labor movement, the print media, the film sector, and the business community. I have made my recommendations to the Acting Minister for Information, Communication and the Arts, and I'm pleased that the Acting Minister have accepted my nominations. The members of the PFCC are as follows. Professor Lily Kong, who is on my right. You may know her as the Vice President of the University and Global Relations at the National University of Singapore. She is also concurrently the Director of the Asia Research Institute. We also have Mr. Terry Lee, who is on the right of Professor Lily Kong. Mr. Terry Lee is the President of the Singapore Insurance Employees Union and a Central Committee of the Singapore NTUC. Next is Mr. Muhammad Anif, is on the extreme right. Mr. Muhammad Anif is an Associate Research Fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies. He is on several boards related to Islamic affairs. I have next to me on my left Mr. M. Rajaram. He is the Senior Director of Straits Law Practice. He was the former Chairman of the Singapore Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the Vice Chairman of the Singapore Business Federation. We also have on the committee Mr. Daniel Yun, I think a familiar face to you. He's the Managing Director of MediaCore Reentry Private Limited. And the other panel member who's not able to be with us today because he is traveling, Mr. Lim Jim Kun, who's the editor of Yanhe Chapao. Now, for the submission of political films for assessment, we would adopt a different process, a differentiated process from that of the classification of other films. What I would like to do now is to describe the process in some detail to you. All films that require classification as you know, are submitted to the BFC for classification. That is the current practice, and that current practice will continue. The BFC will decide on the classification for films that are relatively straightforward. Films with content concerns are sent to the Films Consultative Panel for their views and inputs. Films that the BFC considers which could be a party political film will be sent to the PFCC for evaluation and for views. You may know this already, but currently all films or videos for classification are submitted online. At the point of submission, the applicant will be requested to indicate whether his submission is for a normal film or a normal video or for a political film. If the applicant indicates that the film submitted is a political film, he will be prompted to download and complete a prescriptive form to state which category of exempted political films his film would fall under. The applicant can also provide more information to explain, to elaborate on why his film falls under that category and thus should be exempted. Now, the completed form, together with the information that is supplied by the applicant, would then be submitted together with the film. The PFCC will then assess the film based on the information that's provided, the declaration that's provided by the applicant, to confirm if it indeed falls under the stated category. Now, let me address the question of assessment of films by the PFCC. We believe that there may be a need for the PFCC to engage with the applicant to allow him to clarify questions that the PFCC may have before we make our decision. This is because the intent and not just the specific elements within the film is an important component in determining if a film should be allowed. And this will allow, I think, the committee to make a more informed and more objective assessment. Now, as part of the assessment process, where necessary, the committee would seek further inputs from the applicant. Now, based on the transcript and the first viewing of the film, the committee may come up with a list of specific issues that may require clarification that have already not been addressed in the submission form. This could include clarifications on whether the applicant has made efforts to verify the accuracy of what was portrayed. We will then reassess the film together with the written responses to these queries before making our final recommendation. We think that such engagement with applicants, providing them with an opportunity to clarify questions, to explain, to provide elaboration, would facilitate the assessment process. And this would definitely allow us to better understand their own perspectives, their own viewpoints, and help ensure that our recommendation is as objective and sound as it can be. The process, as I have described, will then be a very robust process. With this in place, the time required for assessment of political films from the time of submission of the film to the time that the BFC makes its decision would eventually be, we suspect, 3 to 4 weeks, depending on the caseload and the clarifications required from the applicant, and the amount of time taken might be longer. So those are my brief remarks.